Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our faculty panel. I'm very pleased to introduce you to faculty from across the disciplines. So all of our faculty who are sitting here have been participating in our IExcel, so that's Instructor Excellence Experience times Confidence equals Leadership program. So we have formed a learning community and have been working together throughout this semester. And I will tell you, this is an outstanding and amazing group of faculty who are dedicated to bringing the very best practices to their students. And when I spoke with the students ahead of time, and you'll hear from them in about an hour, the students speak so highly and are so appreciative of the very hard work and dedication and mentorship that their faculty give to them. So I would like to introduce you to our faculty panelists. So we have, I will go from your left to right. Dr. Kimberly Monroe, who is an assistant professor of global affairs. Dr. Jamey Piland, an associate professor of communication. Dr. Lynda Jackson, an associate professor of business administration. Dr. Sharon Washington, visiting instructor of communication. And online, we have with us Dr. Rewa Burnham, associate professor of English. And joining us soon, we will have Professor Erin Carriere-Kretschmer, who is coming from class. And we will have a couple of our faculty who are so dedicated, they will be running off to class in just a few minutes. And so we will begin with Dr. Monroe. And so the format of this is each professor will go through and share some of the work that they have been putting together, the ideas that they have for their class. And then if we have time, I have a few additional questions I'll ask, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for that introduction. I'm a little under the weather, just a little cold, so I sound a little different than I usually do. Thank you all for having us today. I'm Kimberly Monroe, Assistant Professor of History and Africana Studies in the Global Affairs Department. I just want to say, to echo Cynthia, the IExcel program has been so amazing. The opportunity to learn from this amazing group of colleagues, and so many others, Dr. Beverly, Dr. Burnham. It's not often that we can come together to exchange ideas about things that we do within our classrooms. And so very fortunate to learn from all of you. Touch on that. So one of the things within my own, I guess, academic journey is taking history courses as a student. Sometimes it's not always fun. You know, you have someone there telling you the different histories and the things that have gone on throughout the world. And so one of my goals when I became a professor was to try to make history fun for students, right? Not to just say, okay, 1850, this happened, 1960, this happened, but for them to be actively engaged within the classroom. And so many of you may recognize from our educational goals of Trinity, this idea of ensuring that our students are ethically, spiritually, culturally prepared for the global world, but also thinking about so much that has transpired across the last few years. Students have been more eager to learn their history and be actively involved within that. So this comes from my third year review narrative, which I'm sure that Sita recognized very clearly. So one of the things that I do in the classroom, and I have class at 10:30, so you'll see me kind of walk away, is I'll play a song before class begins. And the song is usually connected to the conversation of that day. And so it's very easy with history because in hip hop, there have been so many artists that have addressed the issues of that time. When we think of KRS-One, Public Enemy, and even now there's an artist called Lil Baby, who I'm sure students are familiar with. He came out with a song called The Big Picture that addressed the issues of that 2020 George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor incident. And so each of my courses has a playlist that students can contribute to that addresses the course themes of that particular course. And it's very interesting because, sometimes students, if they give a presentation, they come with a song. And so I'm learning from the students as well, because I don't know all music and I don't know all genres. And so they bring in their own music, and even so much so that in at least two of my courses, students they create their own like autobiographical playlist with 4 songs that addresses who they are, their background. And so we have very much a global campus. Many of our students are from West Africa, Latin America, Central America, and other spaces. And so again, I'm learning from students in terms of their histories and their cultures and what truly stands out to them. And so in the spirit of inclusive excellence, we are able to learn from one another within the classroom space just by using music. And so here's just an example of a playlist from my African diaspora class, where students are, learning from songs like Bob Marley, Redemption Song, Get Up, Stand Up, and even, and I have The Last Poets for the Millions. So that's just one example. Other assignments that I do is for the final project, kind of giving students a choice. And this is something that we learned through IXL, right? Giving students a choice, not just in terms of the topics that they choose and within the class, but the type of assignments that they can do. And so for one of the final projects, right now in my Intro to Africana Studies course, students can choose between doing a podcast, an oral history project, or a research paper for their final projects. And this is really cool because they do all are accompanied by an essay. And so they're not skipping out on the writing when they're doing the podcast. But what's interesting is that when students are doing these projects, they're able to go out into their communities to have conversations with people that are very much connected to the class. So last semester when I did this, students were interviewing restaurant owners who were from Senegal, right? And they're asking me, what has been your experience here in Senegal? And then they bring that back to the classroom. And so we're able to have a very much of a global conversation about what it's like to be an immigrant, right? What it's like to migrate to the United States, own a business, and thrive within that business. Because if any of you know DC, we have food from all across the world right here, and it's really cool. And one of the other things that I do, and I'll just go to the next slide. So with the IXL program, I was able to develop inclusive pedagogy in my history course. So in addition to the music, the podcast, the oral histories, and other things that I do, this semester in my history, African-American liberation movements, students are doing a role play. And this is an idea that I got from our first session of IXL. And so today it's actually happening at 1:30. Thank you, Sister Ann, for allowing us to use the steps of the chapel. Each student will be reciting a 5 to 6 minute speech based on an African-American woman activist from the 20th century. And so they'll be talking about Claudia Jones, Assata Shakur, Amy Jacks Garvey, so many. And it was exciting to do. And at first, the students was like, "You're not inviting anyone, are you?" And I was like, "It's up to you all." And so I do want to share that with you all, that today they'll be doing their simulation of role play, where they'll all be reciting a speech from an activist. And so thank you again to IXL and to Cindy and the whole Science Faculty for doing this institute, because I gained so much from it. Thank you.
It's hard to follow Dr. Monroe, but I'm going to do my best. I also am completely benefited from using IXL and the leadership of Dr. Du Bois in the fact that we were able to have collaboration. I think post-pandemic, we were starving for hallway talk, intellectual discussions. What are you doing? What are you doing? And so every time we did this online, and every time we were in a breakout room, I think everybody would agree we were in a breakout room. The breakout room would go, "You only have 15 seconds." And people were like mid-sentence. And we never even got to the task because we were sharing ideas. And so to me, that's like such good progress, such good outcome that would happen, and that would be a part of what's going on in the process of IXL. The second thing is, in terms of inclusive pedagogy, I think that there's been a lot of transitions that we've made as instructors from being, doing distance learning and being online and figuring out what synchronous and asynchronous and and trying to make students be able to have some level of second level orientation to where's the syllabus and how do I do this and, how do I incorporate that? And then we came back to person. And I think some of us stayed with that process. And for me, that's what allowed the transition. That what we've been doing technically online was also a way that we were trying to, and this would be the second slide about developing instructor presence. The idea of instructor presence is not new to Trinity faculty. Trinity faculty are very engaged with their students. They put them in small groups. They have them do activities. They walk them around campus. They take them off campus. So the idea of instructor presence is there. But I think one thing that is a way to extend this, which includes the inclusivity part, is engaging students in varieties of ways. Not only just my own instructor narrative, which we talked about in IXL, like, do we share our point of view, our lens, our own narrative with our students? And I think that one thing that I've been working on slowly when I talk about communication and even in women's studies is that regardless of the class, I talk a lot about students' experience and reflection on their identity as part of that connection. So if I'm asking them to do that, then I must do that myself. And I've always done it, but never identifying it in a formal way. And so I think that it's important to talk about that academically and as pedagogy practice. And so establishing and introducing strong classroom community. The only way that's going to happen is if we increase student-to-student engagement and faculty and student engagement. And that means not only just in the classroom, but then when they're not in their 2 or 3 or sometimes 1 night a week class, how are we engaging them outside the classroom? And that's where being online was actually a benefit for Trinity, because students are very good at answering discussion boards. They're very good at, working on assignments and connecting with other students. We can add peer review to that. We can add peer discussions to that. And then back in the classroom, I started every day with kind of slow at first, just like, introductions, but then eventually got into more about working on their own personal narrative. And that could include, what did it take for you to get to class today? We know that a lot of students, and these are 2-minute discussions, just like pair off, and sometimes if people are reticent, I'll just be like, you two, and it's just the idea of remind yourself your name, practice people saying people's full name, learning people's names. And then like, what did it take for you? And again, that's part of this idea of inclusion. Like, I didn't know that, you struggled to get to class. I didn't know that your grandmother was ill. I didn't know that you commuted an hour and a half. I didn't know you lived on campus. That's so cool. When I'm on campus, I should meet you for, in the deli. So the idea is that it increases that engagement. It provides opportunities for utilizing multivariant kind of approaches that, again, accentuates the individual perspective. So the idea is that, we can go to the next slide. The idea is that if we look at inclusive pedagogy, and in every single class I teach, I working this idea of identity as it relates to what people are learning. What do we bring to the table? What does my background as a second generation Norwegian, German, Catholic, Republican family from California in the agricultural valley of the San Joaquin Valley bring to the insights that students have? And then how, when I was that level as a college student, how did college influence that identity? And I talk about my transformation and what professors did for me to allow me to, I always say the biggest thing I had to do was come out to my mother before I went to graduate school as a Democrat. And, it was a big conversation that was well supported, by the way. There was lots of controversy in my family, and I talk a lot about that. Like, my mother was helping people get citizenship from El Salvador who were undocumented, but my mother would vote hard on immigration in California. And so it was like this, and so when I got to college, I started questioning those things that were what appeared to be central to, me experiencing my life. And I think that's valuable to students, because then they can see that wherever you are, you have an opportunity to think or learn from other people and then experience that. What I noticed online is that when students didn't have private space, when they didn't have separateness from maybe other people in their household, or just even the opportunity to have a quiet space, these kinds of conversations got very limited because part of the discovery is engagement. And there's ways to do it online, but now that we're back in the classroom, this just accentuates this idea of student to student engagement. So one of the assignments I do, and this is not a new assignment, but I'm using it in all of my classes now. And I'm saying every time you come to the table for a conversation, to meet with a professor, to exchange with a colleague about what you did for your paper, what topic assignment you picked, how do your master status identities, your race, your class, your sexuality, your gender, your able-bodiedness, your ability, what do you bring to the table every time that happens? And then I give multiple examples and we just keep reiterating that because the goal is that authenticity about your identity and heterogeneity is the strength of the individual, the strength of your academic excellence, and we have to find ways to give voice to that. And so if students understand that maybe the background that they have influences how they study history, business, communication, math, then it may make more sense. And so some of the quotes that you see is, students who had said they had studied policy had never thought of themselves as part of that. So they never thought of themselves as agents of change. And that's one of my favorite quotes is that I had a student in a class who was in global affairs. And at the time, she had never, she studied it, she was an A student, but she said, I never thought of myself as somebody who was contributing to this. And even though we give that message a lot, sometimes it's just not part of the process. Another one is when we talk about, our master status identities, we always think of cultural differences as out there. In other words, if the class looks like it's not diverse, in other words, if people are all looking similar, and I say skin color or women of color, then we don't recognize the levels of diversity that people experience. And so with that, you get a comment like, I thought about culture and I connected it to nationality, not here. And she said right here, right here, right here, that there's we have so much in common because we're both Latina or both African American, and yet we're so different. And I love to know that level of diversity that exists within my own group. And I think that that's really important. And then they learn about their conversations with their families, because again, as I talk about my family teachings, they learn that some of the things that we're experiencing in their family were also unique. And so these are just simple examples, and IXL just accentuated this. There's so much more to do, and there's so many more options that IXL has provided with us, mainly because we're sharing this. And one of my favorite stories is that the idea that people were imposing was negotiating assignments and negotiating flexibility. And I just had it happen, and I shared it at our last meeting, and it was like this big success because a student said, because I said, I'm going to bring you treats because I know you're really tired. So I was saying, is anybody allergic to sugar? They can't eat sugar, they can't eat nuts. And they were like, did you say presents? And I was like, and I said, I could bring you a present. And they were like, can the present be that we can negotiate the final project and the exam? And that's a direct result of this process, that and that's when we know it's working, that they're listening, they're paying attention to pedagogy, they're saying, you're giving them voice to say, Dr. Piland, we have 2 things due in 2 weeks. Can we negotiate that? And so I was like, well, you have to do both, but what's an option that you can do? And they go, what if we took the test, but we could bring our study guide in, just the study guide, and put it on the desk and we could use it? And I said, yes. And they were like, I had given them, Christmas in July. So again, to me, that is kudos to this team and to all the Trinity faculty who worked so hard and to give us this opportunity, Dr. Du Bois, to work with IXL. So I look forward to next steps, more hallway conversations. more collaboration, because it truly gave me hope and inspired me, because we felt a little isolation in the last 2 years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I feel so fortunate to have the opportunity to work with the IXL. We started before class even started. So we started sometime in August, I guess. And immediately we were able to get things that we could use in our classroom. And in fact, one of the first things that I used was the introduction. The introduction let our students know from the very beginning that this was going to be a different environment. So my journey toward that inclusive excellence pedagogy began with revamping my syllabus. So my cover slide shows you the first thing that my students see when they open the syllabus. I want them to know who I am. I want them to have a bit of my welcoming attitude. And I want to start from a good place. I want to start where they think that they know me and they can trust me and they can put their academic journey for business in my hands, and I will help them get there. Next slide, please. So one of the first things that I worked on, among many, was building an inclusive syllabi. And being with this group was so wonderful because each week we got a chance to collaborate. And so I ended up with something that was an idea from many other faculty members. And I'll be working on this for a while. It's a work in progress. I want it to be a friendly syllabus. I want it to be a syllabus that students want to read to see what's next. I also added some inclusive introduction assignment. That was the first thing we learned at the IXL course, and we used it the first week. And it was so important that they were given an opportunity to actually tell us about themselves in their own way. I normally use, tell us something unique about yourself. Or I'll say, tell us something that we'll never forget about you. But in this way, they didn't have to do unique or something that they would forget about us. What they did was they did it their way. They did it their way by using a PowerPoint with pictures of them. They talked about their grandparents. They talked about a food that really was important to their culture and their family. It was just so exhilarating to see all these things that we were learning about each other. And the one that I was most impressed with was the TikTok. I had never even expected a TikTok. I didn't even mention TikTok. And the student was so proud to tell us that she was a picky eater, so she showed us some foods that she didn't eat. She loved fashion. Her gig, we're business, so her side gig was doing hair, and she did it really well, and she showed us some of her models. This was so wonderful that I was automatically completely in the arms of IXL. It was something that really helped us all out. Let's see, we pivoted from demanding language in that syllabus. I went back and I tried to pull all of that out. I talked to the science folks. They told me that it would be a good idea to use your picture. We collaborate on each move forward. And that's another thing that's really wonderful about it. Currently, I'm working on another proposal, and everyone knows it now, but it's to remove some of the standard parts of our syllabus to an online presence on the homepage and have that link on our syllabus, because our syllabi now, especially since the pandemic, has grown to like 15 pages, believe me. And so a lot of the faculty have agreed with me, and except I have one member who says he doesn't think he'll put his picture on the front ever. So, but there are a lot of people that agree with me that we should always try to get it to be something that everyone wants to read. Try to get it to be something that everyone wants to see and see what's going on in the classroom. Another thing that I've done, and this is all too inclusive and converting to my inclusive assignments, has been to give them more choice in naming their own teams. I always pick the teams for them before. I give them choice in naming which corporation they're going to study. I always use McDonald's, General Electric, certain, group of organizations, and I heard the same thing each semester. And now I'm learning from them with the different corporations they're selecting, even down to naming their own team. You'd be surprised how important that is and how creative they are in selecting their name. I had the gold diggers now. I used to say, you have to give me a, you have to tell me a stone, you could be a diamond or pearl or whatever, or you need to tell me about a flower. And I just leave it at that. But now with them creating their own names, they're so creative, and it's wonderful that they're taking into consideration their diversity. They're taking into consideration who they are. They look at their names and create words with their names. So it's been really great. So the next level for me is to design more assignments that's going to also give them that opportunity to determine how they complete the assignment. And they can use a YouTube, in-person role play. And unlike a previous speaker, we still have a written backup, so it won't affect not doing the writing, but the students are so excited to do something different. I didn't even realize they had YouTube, subscriptions, and they're using YouTube, and they're excited to do that. So I want to be a part of that. So in the future, I'm thinking that allowing our students to have more creative opportunities is actually teaching them on top of teaching them. I am a student of quality management because, I'm business. So I still hang on to what we learned years ago in quality management. And so one of those things is to ensure that we can provide just-in-time improvement. So rather than just look at my evaluations and then try to improve the course the next semester, I've now created a midterm reflection. And this midterm reflection enables the students to let me know what might not be going well or what's going really well. And then I can determine to make a just-in-time, that's a quality management term, just-in-time improvement. One of the ways that we've done it thus far is that I always use the icebreakers in order to open the classroom and call the roll. I give them an icebreaker. And icebreakers are just mindless, fun things. What's your favorite dessert? Or chicken, beef, or fish. And they don't have to think about it. It's just fun to get their voice in the classroom. However, I did get a comment that, okay, Dr. Jackson, I like the icebreakers and I like having a chance to speak, but can we sometimes do it based on the chapter or based on the things that we've just done? And hey, yes, great idea. So now the first class of the week, we do something that's fun and mindless. The second class of the week, I'll ask a question that's related to the chapter. And so I like for them to see how flexible we can be when they come up with ideas. So the journey really has no end, but I look forward to this exciting ride. I look forward to the opportunity to continue working with our IXL group. We really love working together. And I look forward to the exciting ride. Great.
All right. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry that a family situation prevented me from being there in person, but I am grateful to Technology Services for making it possible for me to join virtually. I want to echo my colleagues. I'm sorry, I have a bit of an echo I'm trying to fix. I want to echo my colleagues' absolute joy and pleasure at the IXL Institute experiences that we've had. They've been absolutely so much fun, so much camaraderie, so many good ideas. And today I'm going to share two diverse practices that I have that I use that have evolved over time as I've been teaching at Trinity. And finally, I will discuss a practice that I have gotten feedback from my colleagues in the IXL Institute and I hope to employ in the future. And I just realized that I didn't introduce myself. I'm Rhonda Burnham, Trinity class of 2005, a blue class. and associate professor of English. So the first strategy that I want to talk about is actually, do you mind going back to thank you. The first strategy I want to talk about is assigning diverse text. Assigning diverse text is something that I think that we all try to do and something that we all sort of think we understand. And I know that when I first started teaching, I thought that, my primary area of expertise is African American literature. And I thought, well, all the texts that I read are diverse, right? They're written by diverse communities of people. They're written by Black people. I'm bringing that to my students. They're going to enjoy and love these texts. However, it's not true that all the texts that I was teaching early on were diverse. Diverse doesn't mean just a few token texts or texts written by Black people or academic or canonical texts in various shades of Black and brown. Rather, it means intentionally offering different styles and levels of text that represent different cultural experiences within a particular racial, in particular racial, ethnic, and gender communities. So for me, that requires moving outside of my comfort zone and not necessarily teaching texts that I'm most comfortable with, but instead expanding my perspective. Teaching texts that aren't necessarily academic texts, making sure that I'm offering a variety of class, protagonists at different class levels, protagonists with different cultural experiences. At the end of the day, the textual analysis skills and literacy skills that I teach can be applied to any text. So why not put a Pulitzer Prize winning author who teaches at the Ivies in conversation with a celebrity memoirist whose parents were deported when she was 14? What happens when students are asked to write about a fantasy novel about oppression that's geared towards young adults? A long form magazine article that focuses on housing struggles experienced by Black families in DC, and maybe a student generated essay from a previous iteration of the class that was particularly successful. What if I asked students to write about all of those texts in the same essay, including a wide range of types and styles of text ensures my students that I value their voices, their interests, their experiences. Next slide, please. And so here is the evidence, here's the proof that it does actually work. Here I have a student, I'm just gonna read. She said, and this is, I gathered this from at the end of the semester, I asked students to write reflections about what they learned, what happened in the class. They said, this course has motivated me to write a book one day. The women in these books have motivated me to write my own story, which I now believe is worth telling. I look forward to publishing my own narrative. So here we see that just experiencing different types of text allow this student to feel like her voice mattered and to see the power of her own experiences. Another practice that, and another inclusive practice that has evolved over time and that the IXL Institute has allowed me to improve is the practice of assigning writing portfolios. Now, this is a practice that's not a new practice. It became popular in the 1990s. And what it means is that students submit their papers to me and I respond, I offer detailed comments, but I don't give them a grade. I just give them the paper back and they understand that they'll have to revise the paper to get a grade. So we do this all semester. And at the end of the semester, students submit all of the papers revised along with reflections that discuss what their experience revising the papers was like. This is an inclusive practice because, first of all, it allows me to grade students on their actual progress rather than according to some abstract idea about what I think writing is or what I think writing should be. Instead, I can look and say, wow, look how much this person has grown. It reduces writing anxiety for students because they know they have to revise, so they're more comfortable submitting their work to me. And it also makes room for more flexible deadlines over the course of the semester. When students are required to evaluate their own progress, they become more strategic in their revision and more confident. Reflecting on how the experience of writing about the text has changed their lives also encourages them to be more self-reflexive than they might have otherwise been. And so here, if you see on the screen, I just captured a few comments from students. And the first one, we can see how strategic this student was with her revision efforts. She says, I replaced weak textual evidence with stronger pieces that gave more information and details. Moreover, I changed the title to one of the papers because it didn't provide insight into what I was going to discuss. So what's really interesting about that to me is that providing insight into what I was going to discuss, that's the language I use in the classroom. And this student internalized that and gave it back to me in her reflection. So that means that she was really sort of listening and really absorbed what was going on in class, I think because there's a more relaxed environment. She knows she's going to have time to revise and apply the skills and not feeling sort of anxious, like, oh my gosh, I got a bad grade on that paper, it's no good. So this really does help students relax and really learn. In the second quote here, we see she said, a student, it's a different student. She says, in paper 3, I use signal phrases. There's a clear argument, and I truly believe it is well written. I feel I redeem myself for paper 2 with this paper. To me, paper 3 is a good paper. And so there we can see the confidence that the student has, that she's worked through her revisions and that she knows that the paper is strong. And that's what we want. We want students to come out of the classes feeling as though, you know, they belong in this space, feeling as though their writing is good, they're improving. And then here in this last quote, we can see how much this student really learned. And again, this is a reason to include diverse text in the class. But she says, I learned that I have a few similar experiences as Alexi, and by Alexi, she means Sherman Alexi, and some of the same feelings he holds for his mother. I also learned, like Ward, I keep going back to places in my life that cause me more pain, but because I am comfortable in those places, I don't change anything about it. Writing this essay helped me to understand the writers a bit more, but also myself. And so again, this portfolio gives students a space to really reflect deeply on the classes and the content that we do in class. It's a personal space, but it's also very much a shared space where I think amazing learning is happening. Okay, next slide, please. And so now that I've told you about 2 practices, inclusive practices that are working well in my classroom, I'd like to talk about an activity that I brought to my IXL experience that had not been working for me. And I ended up receiving amazing feedback from my colleagues that gave me the confidence to try it again. So this activity is called the Community Connection Source Assignment. And so my goal here is I asked English 107 students to include an interview with someone in their local community as a source, one source out of 10 for their paper. And the purpose of asking them to do that is asking them to sort of broaden their idea of what expertise is. It's like, what is this? How does this research read to people in your community? How are people in your community dealing with these issues? Do they have a level of expertise that maybe you hadn't considered? So it encourages students to broaden their definition of expertise. It bridges this distance between the classroom and their communities, and it places value on the input from their communities. And so I think the first time I tried this, it did not work as well because I didn't realize that I needed to teach students or discuss interviewing with students in more concrete ways. But in the IXL Institute, my colleagues gave me that feedback, and now I feel really confident that I'll be able to make this assignment work in the ways that I imagined. Okay. Thank you.
So much.
Good morning. Yeah, it's still morning, right? Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Washington. I'm the visiting instructor of communication for Trinity. And little known fact, I've been on campus literally 24 years, right? I attended here. I was an adjunct professor here and now a full-time faculty member here. So I truly benefited from all that Trinity has to bring. So I remember when the Science Center was the old place. I taught in there and I actually took classes in there, so I remember that. With this, I'm honored. So thank you, Dr. Du Bois, for selecting me to participate in this program, to collaborate with all my colleagues, because as an adjunct, sometimes we didn't get to collaborate, right? So this is a great opportunity to get to know what other people were doing in the classrooms, what I can improve on. And because I'm in communication, I'm always looking for or assessing how I can effectively communicate, right? Not only have I been on campus 24 years, I'm an entrepreneur. When I came to Trinity, I had 2 children. I was a single mother. I went to school full-time and I worked full-time. So I do understand the challenges that students have a whole lot, but it was a great experience. I learned here with Dr. Piland. I became a feminist. All types of great opportunities happened. So I am actually honored to be able to extend my experience along with my education to my students. With that, dealing in the program, finishing up, because I don't think we're finished though, right? I don't think we're finished, but for now, what I was able to do was take all of this information and not just be able to feel comfortable collaborating with my colleagues and being able to implement inclusive strategies in my classrooms. I was able to go back to my teaching philosophy and update it to what I actually do. So for me, it's a commitment to expand the students' knowledge between fusing the theory with practice. Because I think oftentimes we're deep rooted in theory, right? And the students go, well, how am I going to use this, right? And so for me, it's important to show them the theory, to direct them through theory, and also see how, here's how it works in the real world. And I always try to tell them my story. You can go to the next slide. I always try to share with them my story so they can understand. I understand exactly where you've been. In some cases, if we're in Maine, I've sat in this very same seat when it's hot, when it's cold, all of those things I've done. So the first thing that I did with this particular ISL, I think this was our first meeting, right, Dr. Jackson? Dr. Jackson and I shared this where we had to identify how our identity was applied in the classroom. And I think I connected with Dr. Jackson right there because she talked about structure. So having kids, having to go to school, having to come back to school late 20s, going into my 30s, I didn't even, I couldn't even fathom, like I was really nervous, I was anxious. I still was thinking about work, I still had to take care of my kids, but there was still a structure. I have, my family is Trinidadian, Nigerian, and Philippine. So I have a large part of me that's structure, so it has to be organized. In fact, my mother's philosophy was C's don't get degrees. So for me, I had to not only attend school, I really had to excel, right? So I examined this of how this impacted my instruction. And early on, so I've been teaching, I was teaching 16 years now, 17 years full-time. So in the beginning, I was really structured, like Dr. Jackson. I chose everything for the students. You do it this way, let me help you, guide you through this process, which was very little room for choice because I wanted to provide the structure that I had, not really acknowledging that times change, right? So as a student, I was putting my expectations. I'm going, oh, you're a mom, you're a full-time mom, you're working full-time. Okay, you can do this like me. So I had to examine that. And this program actually helped me to understand the improvements that I could enlist in my classroom experience. So a couple of them was that I was going to create activities around student choice, which was very new for me because I'm all about structure, right? So it was very new for me. So I said, okay, our first assignment was to do this in the Excel program. And so I said, okay, I'm going to implement this in what I do. Another piece of this, I was thinking, I'm going to be more flexible and inventive with assignments. And I want students to have fun, but I also want them to learn. In addition to that, I want across disciplines that they can take the information and that it's useful as soon as they walk out the door. So not in the future, but right now. And so one of the things that I did was I was able to implement choice in the classroom. And now I teach a foundational course, COM 150. I teach a lot of courses. So not only I told you my background, but I've taught in SPS, CAS, business, and communication. So I have a wide variety of courses that I've taught. And in fact, I think I've taught over the 16-year period about 26 different classes. So I'm teaching foundational classes, and it's important that they get, I'm teaching one foundational class, which is critical thinking, and it's debate, it's argumentation. And one of the things that the first day, the students were like, well, Professor Washington, how are we going to use this? I said, everything is an argument. Not necessarily an argument where there's a verbal disagreement, but everything you have a stance that you're building information upon. And so I'm going to teach you how to use this in English and any other courses you have when you're writing papers, when you're delivering presentations, so that this can help you. So the way I implemented choice in the classroom this time, which again was a stretch, I have to reiterate that this is a stretch for me, is having them choose their partners in class for group assignments. And we all know, students probably can attest to this, they hate group assignments. When you say group assignments, the world falls apart in a second, right? But I wanted them to be able to choose their partners. And since this was oral argumentation, I had them create an argument as to why they should keep those partners. What this did is actually help them think through and get to know some of the students that they didn't know, that they kind of just chose because, oh, I like you, or what have you, were sitting next to me. It got a chance for them, to know one another, but actually assess their strengths. Like, okay, what can you do? What are you good at? You're good at writing, you're good at speaking. Okay, you're on my team. And they did this assignment so well that I'm going to implement choice when I have group. In almost all my communication classes, there's a group element piece to it. So I'm just going to allow them to pick it and be able to defend why they should keep the groups that they have, because I think that worked out very, very well. Next slide. Okay. So with that, when I shared that, our third meeting, I shared what I did and that it worked inside of the classroom with the choice. I was then able to collaborate with some of my other colleagues, and which we're still collaborating. So recently, Dr. Wyler and I teaches CRS in English, was trying to figure out how to make her lit review presentation more robust. And my entrepreneur, my piece as an entrepreneur, I'm a marketer and I work in social media. So I said, why not TikTok? Or why not have them build reels? Because the social media space is filled with perspectives. That's probably the nature of oral argumentation, right? Filled with perspectives, right? So I said, why not have them take their lit review or take their paper and actually create a reel or video or TikTok piece in 3 points and build it out as a presentation that's way more comfortable for them. And that's interesting to their classmates in their class to make it more interesting. So we've been working on that. We discussed how it works between our classes because some of my COM 150 also take CRS and 102. So it's actually been working. So I didn't place on here, but my students are like, hey, I'm able to write papers better because I've been able to outline. And my famous line in class is always, if you take my class, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove, right? So they're able to do more solid research to have them support what they have. And so they've been able to use this in their English classes and some other courses, and they're happy about it. So I'm excited that I was here kind of getting this experience, still getting this experience. For the future, I'm looking to talk with more other disciplines or other groups where we can actually collaborate together on assignments so that the students can get a little bit more out of it and understand from class to class, so that way they won't go lost. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Dr. Erin Carriere-Kretschmer has been teaching a mentor moment class in the International Studies program. So we had a
I
few
do
more
believe
minutes.
we are time pressed.
Yes,
I
so if
do-
you could just,
Yes,
thank you so much.
absolutely. So first of all, it's a great privilege to be here. And I've already learned a great deal just from this short conversation. So thank you for incorporating me into this. In the name of time, I will do my best to be quite efficient. So Global Affairs Mentorship One, let me just give you a tiny bit of history with regard to this. The physical sciences started this wonderful series of courses called the Mentorship Moments course. Mentorship Moments courses 1 through 4. They're 1 credit courses, and they start when these students come into the physical sciences and run through the next several years. And there are several goals, including building a community. But there are a number of other goals related to these. It's professional skills development, it's awareness of where you stand with your skills, your study skills, your analytical skills. And Dr. Stoker, who also is in global, I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. Anyway, Dr. Sharon Carriere-Kretschmer, Global Affairs. So Dr. Stoker and I, who's also in Global Affairs, we had been exposed to the Mentorship Moments classes because Dr. Du Bois and her team shared them with us. And so we decided that Global Affairs needed something very similar. And we have modeled a course, 2 courses after it. One is Mentorship 1 and one Global Affairs Mentorship 1, and one is Global Affairs Mentorship 2. If you wouldn't mind going straight to the next slide. Or yeah, yes, sorry. So what are we trying to achieve in these courses that we're modeling after the Mentorship Moments courses in the physical sciences? We are trying to effectively implement a model, implement the same model by focusing in on building a community of global affairs students who feel seen, who feel as though we understand who they are, that they are part of something bigger. The question becomes, how do we do this? We do this by engaging in many similar assignments that are similar to what the Mentorship Moments does in the physical sciences. We are trying to get the students to be fully aware of who they are, what their skills are, what they bring to the table, what kinds of skills are valued in the global affairs environment in terms of jobs. We do this by engaging them at the beginning with very inclusive assignments. We ask them to brainstorm about themselves and their own habits and how those habits have contributed to their success academically, as well as outside of the classroom. And we get them to think about and do assignments that have them reflecting on assignments they've already submitted and what habits that they had that contributed to maybe a suboptimal outcome as far as they were concerned, or what was optimal about the outcome from it. We engage them with literature, academic literature regarding the habits of successful people. What do other people in other places and other disciplines say are the things that drive success? And then how can you as an individual, being who you are, incorporate some of these things? Can you take some of these on? Can you incorporate these into some of the things that you do to drive your own success? With the next stage being, who do you want to be? Let's draw it out. Let's get a mind map. I don't know to what extent you're familiar with what a mind map. You can go right to the visual at the end. Yeah, this. So I searched for one that would make a little bit of sense in terms of career development, but so many people do better when they put their ideas on paper in a way that they feel represents who they are, or they use a YouTube video or a TikTok video or what have you. So what one of the assignments, for the penultimate assignment for the Global Affairs Mentorship 1 is a mind map, broadly speaking, which can incorporate and embed video, audio files, or whatever they want, and as many channels as they want, with all the information related to who you are, what your goals are, what kinds of jobs you want. And throughout the semester, the assignments that they've been asked to do, specifically, I have them identifying job titles, job descriptions, skills, what they have, what they want to develop, what's reflected in the jobs that they find that are interesting to them. All of these things are going to be on this mind map in some way, in a way that the student feels represents who they are and where they potentially want to go. This is a tool that they can use, and I asked them to do it electronically, so they can build on it, so they can add to it, because the next class, Global Affairs Mentorship 2, requires they will build on them. This is a process, and this is the focus. And so much of what you guys have talked about is a journey, a process. This is not an end game. This is not over. This is a conversation. It is collaborative. And I, as the instructor, am merely providing a framework of assignments to encourage you to engage with the things that make you who you are and will help you to get to where you want to be. I can be done.
Thank you. Amazing, Professor. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.